Welcome to the Mind Myself podcast. I'm Esther, and it is my pleasure to be bringing you information about healthcare approaches, health issues, and people's health journey stories, all from the complementary, holistic, and integrative perspectives, helping you become your own best health advocate and helping you make your own informed choices because you matter. Welcome to Mind Myself Conversations with E. I'm Esther, and it is my pleasure to welcome our guest today, Elizabeth Bishop. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Esther. I'm pleased to be here. And I often refer to myself as E as well.
Fantastic.
So we got the two E's.
Two E's for the price of one today. Awesome. Yes. I love it. Well, Elizabeth, tell us about your credentials, what you do, and how you came to this amazing work that you do in the world.
For sure, I will do that. Happy to do that. So I've been in human services for more than 40 years now, started when I was a teenager, very much a calling, felt a call, knew what I wanted to do. And then my career has kind of morphed and evolved over the years. So I've worked in developmental services, brain injury rehab, some mental health, things like that. And then I've also been teaching at the post-secondary level for about 35, 36 years now as well, and have done, face-to-face, online, asynchronous learning, distance education, field placement, like all kinds of varieties, mostly with Confederation College, which is in Ontario, and mostly with students who are getting ready to go into a human services field. So I've got a diploma in developmental services, a bachelor in psychology and religious studies, and a master's in adult education. And I'm just working on my PhD right now to investigate further my master's work, which resulted in conscious service, and look at service as an expression of love and the connection to joy and fulfillment.
Not that has anything to do with women who are coming to Mind Myself at all.
No, so much.
Totally. So tell us about conscious service. What is this? This is the foundation of all the work you do, I imagine.
Yes.
Tell us about it, what it is from your perspective, and why it's so important.
So for me, it didn't necessarily start out as conscious service. I would say that I probably am realizing now that I've started working on this material right from the very beginning, but didn't know that I was doing that. So consciously working on it for probably a couple of decades now. But I started out in my master's research wanting to understand how we best facilitate self-reflective practice. And I thought that was the key thing. And by the end of that research project, I realized, no, this is much bigger. So conscious service evolved out of that, and self-reflective practice became like the dynamic ingredient sort of at the center, the thing that we do. But conscious service is about self-connection and transformative relationships, enlightened communication, and co-creating community. And it's very much an interconnected kind of approach, an umbrella. So it doesn't replace tools or techniques that practitioners might use in their service delivery, but it provides sort of a container for how are we going to do it, bringing in more consciousness, more energy of love, and really learning to live the values and principles that we say are important to this kind of work.
Wow. So if somebody's hearing you and going, okay, that's great for a professional who's in the health services industry. That's wonderful. But what about me, average person, awesome person, me, who says, well, how does that apply to me as a regular person?
Yes, there's so many principles that evolved in this approach that apply to just our day-to-day life. So I often think of service as an energetic force. First, it's an energy of love. It's one of the ways that we can express love in the world, whether that be as a professional or with people on the street or the people we live with and are in relationship with. So the principles are very much, sort of around any kind of relational space, and so some people think that we're here to serve each other, that we grow through our relationships. So the principles guide that, with one key piece being the centering of self in those relationships. And I think there's a lot of people in the world right now, even if they're not in a traditional service profession that really want to contribute to change in our world. And
Yes.
so conscious service is an umbrella and approach for doing that. And it offers the space for your own understanding of what it means to be self-connected and how you experience that, what it means to engage in enlightened communication and bring your energy into the way that you communicate in the world. So it's not a prescriptive, here's the only way you can do it. Here's a linear process. It's very much again, an approach.
Right. And it seems to me that it has at least two pillars. One is self-care, self-reflection. And then the other pillar is service, because we all do some sort of service out into the world.
Yes.
And we're all loving and attending to the people in our worlds in some kind of way or another. Shouldn't say all, but I imagine most of the people who are coming and watching this are doing that.
Yes.
So how would you define self-care and service together in a way that's not mutually exclusive?
Well, I think the first thing that comes to mind when you use that particular terminology is that caring for ourselves is an act of service to self. So, and I often think to take that a little bit more deeply, if we're thinking about service as an expression of love, I like to kind of flip things around there, where quite often we think of self-care as an agenda item. We go into our calendars and think, well, I got to carve out a half an hour at least for myself, every third day, or I have to have a bath, or I have to, go to yoga, and all those things are great. But if we come from a place of being grounded in a self-loving presence, and then responding or, coming into self-compassionate attitudes, then the self-care flows from there, and it becomes more of a self-responsive in the moment. We respond in the moment. So it's got a lot to do with how we're speaking to ourselves, how we can sit with what we're feeling when things come up, the ways that we respond when something is happening in the moment. So I see it as an act of service to self, and that only, enhances what we're able to offer in the world. Not that we need that as an excuse. We don't take care of ourselves so we can do more in the world. We take care of ourselves because we love ourselves.
Right. So can you give us an example or two of ways that we would talk to ourselves, particularly as a woman, how we might be more conscious around that? I'm sure we've all heard some things, but from your perspective, what would some examples be?
So I'll just use some of my own personal examples and things that I've noticed. If something happens where I feel like I've made a mistake, or I spoke sharply to someone, or I've acted in some way that I don't feel good about, then if I tune into my self-talk, I might be saying, oh, why'd you do that again? Or, oh, you screwed up, or now you're going to have to, they're probably thinking this. And I go into a big story, where instead I could be saying, okay, you don't feel good about that, and that's okay. It's natural. Everything's all right. What kinds of things can you do to just sit with that feeling first, and then to move forward? Do you need to have a conversation? What will help you feel better? Or when I have, say, an emotional memory come up, say like the cellular memory, I feel all of a sudden I'm anxious. And I might notice that I start trying to tell a story around that knot in my belly about, it must be because of this, or it's because that happened, or this went on, or it's reminding me of some ancient experience. And it might be all of those things, but a self-loving response could be just to say, you know what, I'm not going to tell the story. Instead, I'm just going to notice. And if I need to speak or talk inside my head or out loud, I'm just going to describe what I'm feeling in my body. And I'm just going to let myself be with it and breathe and give it space. That's an act of self-love.
So I'm hearing presence. The word presence
is
comes to mind. Being,
absolutely.
No matter what, if I'm feeling crappy, or if I'm feeling bad about myself, or I'm feeling angry at someone else or hurt, how can I be with that in the moment without reacting, and just allow the feelings, and then make a choice?
Yes. And I think the other piece that I find really powerful is intentionality. So always, tuning in to, well, how do I wish I was feeling instead, if I don't like this? Or how would I like to feel when I go into this particular communication or interaction with someone that maybe I'm worried about? How would I rather feel? What would help me feel more comfortable? Just those kinds of in the moment responses, and then following through as much as we possibly can.
Got it. And so now let's focus a little bit more on the service part. We've
Okay.
talked a little bit about self-love and presence and allowing our feelings to be what they are. How do we do service from a place that doesn't cost us? I mean, I guess it will always cost us in some regard, but how do we do service from the healthiest place possible?
Well, again, I see service more as an energetic force first before it becomes an act. And so I think if we're letting that flow through us and it becomes an organic expression, or an organic response to someone, then there is very little in terms of, humaning it. You know what I mean? That I humanly have to do this and I have to move this mountain or make this happen, which is a big piece when we're working with other people. And I think a key sort of challenge that people have, especially, anyone who cares for someone in an extraordinary kind of way. If you're raising children, if you're caring for a parent, if you're working in a profession that requires this kind of emotional labor all the time. So I think that the key for me, what I've learned over the years, is that it is about that self-responsive piece, and it is about shifting my mindset. So what is my role here? If I start thinking that I have to control an outcome, if I have to stop someone from doing something, if their behavior is making me afraid, I'm no longer in a place of service really anymore. Certainly not in a place of compassion, because compassion would hold the vision of a person's capability and would keep me in a space where I know what my role is and help me to avoid overstepping that. So it's that in the moment balance, responsiveness, and challenging ourselves when we feel as though we need to do something that might not really be our responsibility to do. Doesn't mean we don't care, but there's a different way of supporting in that energy. Acts that come from love feel a certain way, and acts that are born out of fear feel entirely different, if that makes sense.
Totally. And I also am reminded of Wayne Dyer's work, where he talks about not being attached to outcomes. I think that that's pretty key in this. If we're accepting and allowing and being in service from that place of consciousness for ourselves first, then we don't have to control or manipulate an outcome for somebody else.
Yes, or for ourselves. I mean, I think it goes both ways, and I'm sure people can relate to that, where we get noticing when we get attached to certain outcomes, and things falling into place the way we want them to be. And that again too is like in the moment when we notice, oh, I'm attaching, this is the way that I want it to go, and we start to worry about it or mastermind it, how we can respond to that moment to try to create space there. It doesn't mean that we don't care about how it turns out, just that we're willing to give it space and let it unfold.
That's a really big piece, isn't it?
It's huge.
We really want something, and we're working pretty hard to get something that we really truly want, and then go, oh, okay, I guess I have to release that. That's a pretty
It's big.
It's a big process.
And sometimes
So,
over and over too. Like sometimes I'll do that very practice. Okay, you know that you really want this. You know that you really, really want it. You want it to turn out. You want it to go the way you want. You're having a hard time letting go. And it's okay. It's natural. And sometimes just doing that kind of eases, oh, okay, no big deal. I don't have to stay in resistance.
another big word, resistance. Well, and speaking of which, let's touch just briefly. I know we have another podcast about joy and fulfillment in the workplace, but how does conscious service and all these things that we've been talking about together, how does that manifest at work, not after work, and all the things that we do to help us feel fulfilled and joyful in our regular life, but at work in a place that typically can be so contentious on occasion?
Yes. Well, and I think we will get into it more in the other podcast, but this will be a good kind of lead in. I see joy and fulfillment as an element or an aspect of well-being. So being in touch with that, to me, doesn't necessarily have to be separated out into home and at work. But how do we tap into that? And then in whatever chosen vocation we have, how are we continuing to bring that in? So let's not make joy and fulfillment about a certain activity, that I only find joy and fulfillment when I'm out in my garden or when I'm out for a walk. But what would be the qualities of that particular activity that resonate as joy and fulfillment within me? And then how can I embody that and find ways of expressing and contributing from that place when I'm in the workplace? Because I think this idea of, home at home, work at work, it's never worked for me. And so I think we need to become more integrated and stop trying to put ourselves in little boxes and that we tuck away for 8 hours at a time.
Right. So recharging at work, finding ways to, again, that consciousness piece of being present, of being mindful, of being unattached to outcomes, about nurturing our soul or nurturing our essence while we're at work, is finding strategies to do that for sure.
Yes. And I think, again, it's in the moment. It's the responsiveness in the moment. It's being intentional. It's flowing with our capacity, our energetic capacity every day, from even moment to moment, changes. So being able to respond to the fact that we don't have the same amount of energy every single day or the same focus every single day, and honoring that and learning how to work with our own natural rhythm.
Totally. And what I'm also, what's triggering it for me in this moment is, and I'm not going to feel good all the time.
No.
So consciousness, conscious service, presence, this doesn't mean, flip the switch and everything's all hunky-dory again. It just means being present in the moment and then looking at ways to recharge.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, we're coming to the close of this fascinating conversation, Elizabeth. What is one thing you'd like to leave your listener with today?
Well, just in light of that last comment that you were making in terms of how do we do this at work or in any part of our life, I think it's mostly difficult when it's a challenging moment. Those are the moments that we find it hard to do this, right? So really embracing that depth of personal responsibility to know that I don't have to run anywhere else to have this fixed or changed, like with what's happening inside of me and how I'm experiencing this moment. I might not like it, but I can still accept that this is what's going on right now and not like it at the same time. So more than one thing can exist at once. And there's something freeing, there's a liberation in that, knowing, okay, I can respond to this and I have my own back. I can trust myself and I can move from that place.
I like that. What a powerful ending. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Elizabeth.
Thank you.
Thank you for your wisdom. Yes.
Thank you, Esther.
Thank you for being with us at the Mind Myself podcast today. We know that time is precious and you've spent some of your valuable time with us. We're grateful. If you would like to reach out to our guests directly, the information is below. And if you would like more from Mind Myself, that information is also below. Please visit our website and check out all the information about the different complementary, holistic, and integrative healthcare approaches, information about health issues, more podcasts, tons of blogs, and we even have a community page for you where you could reach out and tell your story safely, or you could ask questions and perhaps somebody else in the world is going through something similar to you. In any case, we're so glad you're with us, and we're doing this because you matter.